Hello everybody and welcome back to Broken Berean, and today I'm doing another long form retrospective that's going to be a bit more expansive than my last one on Babylon 5 and doing a few new things to try out some stuff. So I thank you for tuning in and taking a look at what will be probably my longest video to date. But first and foremost, there will be spoilers. I will be talking about everything in the Stargate franchise, and I will be looking at what could possibly happen in the future with Amazon and MGM holding the rights to Stargate and what we know so far. This retrospective is twofold. One, for those that have watched it, to spark you to go through it again, because it's been a while, and you remember you really enjoyed it, and that's not a false memory. You really enjoyed it. And second, to give those that haven't seen it but heard of it the spark to explore it, to dive into what Stargate is and the franchise that should have continued on for decades that just didn't. So please stay to the end, because there's going to be a lot of stuff that's be going through, and there's going to be the prospective that's going to be fun to to explore and to speculate on what we might see in the future with this franchise. Now, I watched 95% of this on Amazon. I started this back in February, about 3 days before they decided to add ads. And that took about 6-7 weeks for me to fully binge the entire franchise. I mean, what's someone supposed to do with 300 hours who's an insomniac? Watch Stargate. So, I'm going to do a lot of outlining and a lot of broad strokes, because if I took the time to spell out every episode, everything that just dive deep into each episode, what it means, how it impacts the series, how it impacts the franchise, how it impacts the characters, this is just going to be a video that would be days long. There's just no way around it. I mean, if I simply took 1 minute per watch time, we're talking nearly 4 hours. No, we're talking about 7 hours, aren't we? Yeah. I mean, that's just 1 minute per hour of showtime. That's just ridiculous. I can't do that. I can't ask people to watch something that long. Now, in the future, if you want me to break down more Stargate, more of the episodes, more of the characters, more of the alien races, more of the series, or just more anything to do with Stargate, I'll do it. But I'm not going to do it here. This is a retrospective to give us that full look at what's going on in the Stargate franchise. Now, I'm going to be going through this in release order of how everything was released, and then we'll go back and we will talk about the proper way to watch it chronologically in the Stargate canon timeline. So, don't get worried if it seems like I'm jumping around a little bit at first. It'll all come to a conclusion at the end, and you will be satisfied, I promise. But the Stargate franchise is started out simply as a movie and just blew up once they created a series and started to take it to the next level. And I love it. I've loved the series. I remember watching it live when it aired week to week. Every series, every episode, just loved it all. Now, the Stargate franchise, what is it? Well, it's a science fiction series that incorporates a lot of sci-fi themes, obviously space travel, but also time travel, multi-dimensional travel, multi-realities, converging, and things like that. But they always have a unique interpretation of it, and it's great. They also borrow an alien race from Babylon 5 for an episode. Yes, I caught that. No, you can't deny it. It's exactly the shadow race from Babylon 5. There's no getting around it. But there's a lot of different things and homages to different sci-fi series, a lot of callbacks, a lot of pop cultural references at the time and past. It's a franchise that tries to be rooted in what would be the real world today when it aired, and it still feels that way after rewatching it again. Now, I have to say that with the exception of the original Star Trek series, in Stargate, the entire franchise, you will see actors and actresses from just about every single science fiction show that aired on TV. From Star Trek The Next Generation to X-Files to shows that wouldn't even exist yet, such as Battlestar Galactica. Obviously, we'll get into it, but Farscape and so many others. I could spend an hour, probably about 3 hours, breaking down all the cameos from all the different franchises. And I was trying to think of one that didn't have it, and there might be one or two, but I mean, we even get a Firefly reference, and I mean, just Stargate is the science fiction hangout for science fiction actors and actresses. It's just everyone came by, everyone did a part, small, little, long. So many supporting characters from so many sci-fi series make an appearance in this franchise throughout all the series. And I absolutely love it. So if you are a fan of sci-fi and you have a favorite show, almost guaranteed you will see an actor or actress from that show in the Stargate franchise. Almost 100%. I haven't found one yet, but if anyone knows of one that doesn't have an actor or actress, and not even a main character, but like a secondary or tertiary character that does not make an appearance in the Stargate franchise, please let me know below, because I want to look into it. Because I really do think there is one in every single one. But I could be wrong. In 1994, this franchise kicks off with the movie. Now, this movie was designed to be a standalone movie by itself. There was no intention of building an entire franchise around this movie, but it was just a sci-fi movie released to theaters with Kurt Russell and James Spader as the two main actors. And I was a nerdy teenager who was enthralled to go see such a cool science fiction movie, because we all went through that. Most of us went through that Egyptian phase in our life. Mine was around 6th, 7th grade. I was just enthralled with anything ancient Egypt, and came out a few years later. I was like, absolutely, science fiction and Egypt, sign me up. I remember I nerded out so hard to go see this movie. Now, this movie has the basis for the entire franchise comes from this. There are some modifications from the movie going forward, just a few, but this is where it all starts and tries to stay true to what is mostly established in this movie. Now, in this movie, there are primarily two main characters. You can argue that, but I'm going to say that there's two main characters. Colonel Jack O'Neill, who's played by Kurt Russell, and Daniel Jackson, who's played by James Spader. Now, this starts out where James Spader is recruited by the Air Force to decipher ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs with no knowledge of why the Air Force is so gung-ho about translating Egyptian tablets. You know, it's the Air Force. But he's recruited because of his knowledge of ancient Egypt, ancient languages, and his theories that the Egyptian pyramids were not built by the Egyptians, that someone else, some other thing or race or people, he doesn't ever specify, but he doesn't believe the Egyptians built the pyramids. That's his theory. That's his academic theory, which puts him out of academia and just makes him a pariah among his intellectual contemporaries. But it makes him perfect to decipher the Stargate cover stones that were on top of the Stargate buried on the Giza Plateau. Now, O'Neill is a hardened, rough and tumble former Air Force military vet who has since retired, and the reason he retired is because the loss of his son. His son died because his son got a hold of his firearm and accidentally lost his life. And he's a distraught human being, just riddled with guilt and pain. And they recruit him because they need someone who's willing to do what needs to be done if the Stargate mission is successful. Now, the Stargate, which we have seen, is a giant circle with 39 symbols on it. So I wrote this down. That means there's 1,987,690,320 different possible seven slot configurations. And the fact that they do have the cartouche, which has 6 of them lined out, it means they have 33 to try. This is part of the movie that didn't make sense when I saw it, still doesn't. They really didn't need Daniel Jackson. What they needed was an afternoon and a lot of extra power to try all 33 different combinations, and they would have figured it out. But that's a plot point you have to ignore and just kind of move past, because otherwise he doesn't get involved in the story, doesn't move anywhere, and it makes the rest of the story just terrible. So once Daniel deciphers the 7th symbol, finds it on the gate, they initiate the dialing sequence to activate the Stargate. This creates a wormhole that opens up to the planet Abydos. Now, Abydos is a planet that they find with inside another pyramid is where the Stargate resides, and no writing whatsoever, which means Daniel can't decipher how to get back. And I do think that's a little planning. They sent a device through what's called a MALP. Honestly, forget the acronym. It's kind of clunky. But it's a giant robot with camera and reading, so we can tell how the atmosphere is, anything like that. But they have a camera. They should have panned it a bit to see if they'd be like, oh, there's writing. We can figure this out for sure. Daniel Jackson, being a very intellectual and confident person in his theories, figured he could solve it. But once they got through, they couldn't find it. So that means that the team that went through the Stargate, Jackson and O'Neill and the other Air Force servicemen, have to find writing or people, someone to help them dial back Earth. Now, because of this, they find a group of people that are descendants of the ancient Egyptians. They speak ancient Egyptian, it's modified, and eventually Daniel Jackson, through part of the story, learns how to pronounce certain vowels and certain things, and starts to realize how that language evolved over the centuries here on this planet, and eventually is able to decipher some written works on the address for Earth. Now, this is where it gets a little hairy. This seems very, very straightforward, very kind of low-tier first act, very low-key sci-fi. Then they realize that the writing was banned by the ancient Egyptian god Ra, who they find out is really an alien that took over an ancient Egyptian boy's body, because his technology is able to repair the human body easily and quickly, and by doing this, he can prolong his life indefinitely. And because of this, this is one of those plot points that gets changed slightly for the franchise. In the viewing of it, he is seen as what we would call one of the Greys in our mythos. He looks like a gray alien who inhabits a human body. but that changes for the franchise, and I do think for the better. And because of this, he comes back and sees that the people are starting to kind of get a little funny ideas that Ra isn't a god, and people start to revolt and stand up, which is why he banned writing in the first place. So a revolt wouldn't happen like on Earth that would prevent him coming back to Earth to get more people as slaves to work in his mines and do what he needs and to serve him. So this is part of the modification in this franchise, but it's a good modification. Ra begins to attack the people of Abydos because they're hiding these people from Earth. He realizes Earth has advanced significantly and have mastered the atomic bomb. And because of this, he tries to basically stop Earth from ever being a problem again. Because Jack O'Neill's failsafe program by the Air Force was to bring a nuke to blow up the Stargate on Abydos' side to prevent anyone from coming to Earth. Now keep in mind, in this movie, all we know is there's 2 gates. So that's all we know. So in their mind, we blow that gate up, no one can come to Earth. So that was why Jack O'Neill was needed. He was the one who'd be willing to lay down his life to make sure this objective is completed if needed. But during all this, we see that they overcome Ra, his guards, and we see that everyone makes it back to Earth, except for Dr. Daniel Jackson. Jackson stays on Abydos because part of a cultural thing and misinformed thing, the chief of the people gave his daughter as a bride to Jackson, but he didn't realize that's what it was till much later. But he kind of fell in love with her. Just she was the one that led him to the knowledge that he was seeking, and becomes close with her and decides, no, I love this woman, I'm going to stay here. So that's where the movie ends. The movie ends with everyone returning home, Ra completely destroyed and wiped out of the universe forever, and Dr. Daniel Jackson staying on Abydos. And this is where the movie ends, and I have to say, probably I wore out my first VHS copy of this movie and definitely have it on multiple platforms now, but this is hands down one of my favorite standalone sci-fi movies. If the series and the franchise never took off, I would still absolutely love this movie. It's fun, it's entertaining, it's nerdy, it's goofy, it's serious. It's everything you love about sci-fi. It's just an amazing standalone movie. So, if you have not watched this movie, or you haven't watched it in a long time, here's something I found out while watching all this stuff. Stargate, the movie, is free to watch on YouTube right now. If you pay for the premium, you don't have ads. If you don't pay for it, there's a few ads. But you don't have to sign up for a streaming service. It is available free on YouTube as of today. I watched it again just for fun, just to see if it actually went through. And sure enough, no, I pay for the premium, no ads. And yep, got everything on it and just loved it. It was great quality, HD quality through my TV. It was wonderful. So if you haven't seen the movie, you don't own it, you don't have a streaming service that hosts it like Amazon, you can watch it for free on YouTube. So go check it out.
Hey, Jackson, I don't think we should eat any food here.
Well, they might consider that an insult.
We will. Well, we don't want to offend them now, do we, Daniel?
chicken. You said chicken. It's good. Tastes. Tastes like chicken. Tastes like chicken.
Good.
Now, back in 1997, the real launch of this franchise started with Stargate SG-1. I will admit at the time I was a little upset that Kurt Russell and James Spader would not be reprising their roles in the series, but honestly, Kurt Russell was never really a TV actor except in his very early career. He was only a movie actor starting like in the late 70s, early 80s. That's all he did until about Monarch, which was the past couple years with that Godzilla series on Apple TV. And James Spader was always a movie actor until not till after this, when it was either The Practice or Boston Legal. I forget which one came out first. That was his TV series, and then he did The Office, and then he did Blacklist. But primarily, both of them are movie actors. So I was a little miffed because I love the characters that they played. I didn't want to see them recast, but they did a good job. I do love the casting that they did for Stargate SG-1. Now, SG-1 takes the sci-fi themes and the seriousness of the movie with the existential threats and all that, but it's also grounded in realism of being in our own timeline, and continues a little bit, but expounds on the lightheartedness and the comic relief that is found throughout the entire franchise, with the exception of Stargate Universe. There's just always a lightheartedness to the series and the franchise, which at first you think, oh, why would you do that? But it actually does. It's done so well, because what it reminds me of is MASH. Stargate is the MASH of the sci-fi genre. It's very serious, tackles different issues, different topics, and things like that, explores different cultures, but will continue to be funny to offset the seriousness of what they're dealing with at the time. So it is a well-rounded series when it comes to just the average person. Yes, it's sci-fi themed. It deals with a lot of different ethical, moral, existential questions, and a lot of different science fiction illusions and different tropes and things like that just they tackle in just a serious and lighthearted way, which is wonderful. And they even do references to MacGyver, because Richard Dean Anderson was recast as Jack O'Neill. They do it right off the bat in season 1 and continue to make little, come on, just MacGyver it real quick. They make these references all the time, and it cracks me up every time I see it. And honestly, they were doing things that were quote unquote meta back in 1997, 98, 99, when in the very first few seasons of this series, back before we even termed it that. They were very self-aware of what they were and how they're perceived and things like that, and it's just great. I don't want to spend time doing all the references. That's probably another 2-hour video just right there. All the meta references unto itself during the series. It's wonderful. It's great. It's funny. It gets me just laughing hysterically when I catch another one I hadn't caught before, or I see the same one for like the millionth time. It still makes me laugh. There's so many good things in this series that's just serious and funny, that just appeals to me growing up watching MASH with my parents, and I just love this combination of seriousness and lightheartedness. Now, there's a lot to SG-1 because this is the longest running series. It went for 10 seasons. So I'm going to lay down a little bit of the groundwork first before we start jumping into the major story arcs and seasons of this series. And by that, I'm going to spell out a bunch of the major alien races that we deal with throughout the series. Not all of them. There's way too many. There's some that come in and come out that are very small, do play important roles, but they're not central enough to spend all that time in a video like this going through a retrospective. So, but let's first start with obviously the humans, the human race, and in this they're commonly called the Tari, and this was the name given to humans by the Gould, and known throughout the universe. If they're humanoid like this, their name are Tari. And that's just how they're referenced throughout the universe because of who coined the name of their race. It wasn't because, oh, we call ourselves Earthlings or humans or anything like that. They just get called that constantly by every alien race. Now, this was given to them by the Gould, which is the first major race we're going to talk about. The Gould are an aquatic symbiote species that we see. This is the deviation from the movie that I talked about earlier. What this means is basically they look like giant slugs or eels, essentially with teeth, that burrow in and take over a host body. Like humans, humanoid life forms, they can take over essentially any creature they want to, but stick to those that are humanoid in nature. They are a species that are propagated by queens. Kind of like you see like an insect or like in bees, the queen births all the drones and soldiers and workers and all that stuff. That's how it is here. The queen births the Gould, and from there they pass genetic memory to each individual Gould symbiote. Now, they first took over a humanoid species called the Unas that I won't get into, but you'll know them when you see them when you're watching this series, that are very humanoid but more reptilian looking. And they were big and strong, but they did not have the ease to repair their bodies as humans did. So that's when the Gould found humans on Earth. That became their preferred hosts. Now, they're parasitic in nature, obviously, and it just doesn't go to their physical attributes. They are a race that continually steals and adapts technology from other alien races and claim it as their own. And we'll see this throughout the series, like, oh, this is no, they actually stole that from these people, or they stole that from this race, or they stole that from someone else and incorporated it into themselves. Kind of like the Borg do. So, I mean, for a while through the series, we believe that the Gould are the ones who created the Stargates. Well, that turns out they just took over the Stargate system. But then we realize, firstly, this is where we realize that their technology isn't 100% based on their own knowledge and accumulation. It is based on assimilation of other people's technology. Now, part of this, because they're such an evil species and parasitic species, there becomes a divide within them. There's a group called the Tok'ra, and that basically translates to English meaning against Ra. They were a group that believed that they should inhabit hosts willingly, hosts that wish to accept the symbiote into them and live a truly symbiotic life, because the symbiotes give abnormal strength and abilities and prolong life for their hosts. And because of this, the Tok'ra thought this is a better, more righteous way to live, and want to wipe out the Gould, who don't want to do that because their methodology is tyrannical and just evil on itself. So there is a division between this race, which we will see time and time again as a theme throughout the franchise. Now, the next group of people are called the Jaffa. Now, Teal'c, seen here, is a Jaffa. Jaffa were genetically modified humans that have internal sacs, I guess is the best way to put it. I'm trying to remember the reference, how they said it, but I do believe it's a sac that allows them to put young gold symbiotes into them to grow and mature. This gives the Jaffa longer life, greater strength, and the Jaffa become the servants and warriors for the Goa'uld. And because of this, they are indoctrinated with the religion and false idea that the Goa'uld are gods. And this is just how it's been for centuries, millennia probably. And this is what they are. The caveat is if they decide that they want to rebel or leave and they remove the symbiote, it will kill them. So when the symbiote matures and it's time for them to be implanted into a host, the Jaffa carrying them will die. End of sentence. It's within hours. The Jaffa just naturally dies, and we'll see this throughout the series where this comes up, and it's a very important point that the Jaffa were genetically modified to also be symbiotic as incubators for the Goa'uld race. So the next alien race we're going to talk about are the Asgard. Now, the Asgard is what we would look as the gray aliens that we know in our mythos of alien studies today. I guess I don't even know what to say. If you study aliens and you've seen X-Files, the grays, small bodies, big heads, big black eyes, the grays. And they are an advanced species that did come to Earth several times during the history of Earth. And they took on the names and monikers. And see, this is where I'm not sure. They don't really say it, but I think they came up with the names and the structure of Norse mythology. That's who the Asgard are. You got Thor, you got Freya, and several others. I can't think of the name, but all their names are Norse god names that they're called throughout the series. And that's just how they interacted with those people up north, while the Goa'uld stuck to kind of Egypt. But the Goa'uld also did other cultures as well, definitely the Chinese and different cultures throughout time. So that's just the Asgard are the gray aliens that we would think of today when you think of, an alien's landed on Earth. That's the one that pops in your head. That's who the Asgard are. They are an exceptionally technologically advanced race, millennias ahead of our own technology, able to do amazing things with their technology and do things to basically see half the stuff that we see in Star Trek. They're that advanced. So, that advanced in what we would say modern time. But they come to be allies with Earth somewhat. But then we get the next race, which I'm going to talk about because it comes up multiple times, and they are the enemy of the Asgard, and they are the replicators. The replicators are a techno-species. They are a species that are 100% artificial, that were created to replicate by creating and building their own small blocks to create creatures and any technology needed, any devices needed, such as spaceships and things like that, with their own materials. We've seen this before in many sci-fi stories. back in Arthur C. Clarke to, as Isaac Asimov, to multiple themes and multiple series where replication is a theme. This is it. This is an entire species that was created and continue to replicate, and their only drive is to replicate and absorb technology to improve themselves. Literally, the Borg. Like I said, there's so many homages to different sci-fi themes and callbacks to different series in the show that this is a blinding obvious one, the replicators. But this is because of this, the replicators are attracted to the advanced technology of the Asgard, making them their largest enemy. And this is what we'll talk about later. But honestly, it is a species that will come later, not just in SG-1. We'll see replicators again. So then we're going to get to the last major race, which we will call the Ancients. They're called the Ancients. They actually have multiple names from different points of view throughout the galaxy, but they are the oldest human race in existence, predating us by a millennium or two, not sure, and doesn't really give us specification, but they were the absolute most advanced race in existence in the entire universe. And they're the ones that created the Stargates. They're the ones that created the Stargate network to travel between planets, not just here in the Milky Way, but in the Pegasus galaxy and throughout the universe. They're the ones that built them and did it for exploration, scientific exploration. That was their drive. Their drive was to learn and innovate, and science and technology is at the forefront of their drive as a species. Now, we talked about a split with the Gold and the Tok'ra. There's a split in the Ancients that we see in SG-1, and we see again in Stargate Atlantis, but I won't talk about that one yet. The Ancients aren't around because after so long and putting technology, they got to a point where everything's shifted to spirituality and existential thought, and they became so spiritualized and technologically advanced that they found a way to ascend to a higher plane of being. Like I said, this isn't something new in sci-fi, but the way they do it is very interesting and very unique. They are able to, someone who ascends is able to ascend to this higher plane, giving them access to all this knowledge. All the knowledge of everyone that ascends is able to instant communication. I don't want to be like, oh, they become angels or gods or anything like that. No, they're ascended beings. We're sticking with that, okay? And they have a rule of no interference. They watch, they monitor, they see everything that's going on, but they don't interfere. Well, eventually, it's never specified when there becomes a split when the Ancients are ascended. A group called the Ori split off because they realize if they can convince people to worship them, they gain power. They gain more power and more strength to interfere in the world and control the universe itself. Now, how does this work? They literally gloss over it in the series. I think Daniel Jackson basically says, yeah, it's really kind of complicated, but just if they worship the Ori, they get more power, and they don't want to share that power, but they won't tell their followers that because their followers in the real world think that if they follow, they will ascend too and able to enjoy the power and knowledge of the Ori. So there is a basically a civil war between the ancients and the Ori. And like I said, you had an evil group with a splinter cell of good that are trying to push out the evil, and then you have the good with a splinter group of evil trying to push out the good. So this is a common thing. Like I said, this is going to be a theme that we see in SG-1. This is going to be a theme that we see in all of the Stargate franchises, with the exception of Universe, because it's a different one. However, there are some major races that I do need to mention off the bat, because it's important for understanding certain points throughout this retrospective. And that's, first, we're going to talk about the Four Race Alliance. The Four Race Alliance is an ancient alliance between the four most powerful and technologically advanced races in the universe. That is the Ancients, the Asgard, the Nox, and the Furlings. Now, we see the Nox a few times, I think 3 or 4 times throughout the series, and that's it. We never actually see the Furlings, with the exception of a imagination sequence, and they look exactly like you would think the name sounds, like if they modeled Ewoks after koala bears. And the Nox are a humanoid species that look like their clothes and hair are part plant. Or say a hippie from the 1960s that hasn't showered in about 2 years. You know, kind of like that. They just look dirty, but they're extremely technologically advanced, but live one with nature, but their technology is beyond compare. These 4 races got together with the goal of pushing out the gold from the universe. And because of this, they are mentioned quite often throughout the series. The Nox and the Furlings, but like I said, they don't play a major part in any of the series, but they are mentioned quite often. So, now let's get into the story of Stargate SG-1. First thing, right off the bat, I'm going to address this now, is the language barrier. Now, in the movie, we saw that they took quite a bit of time to figure out the language and things like that, and they started to do it in episode 1. And I think they realized that if this is going to be how it is throughout the series, the first 20 minutes of every episode is going to be them learning a new language. And because of that, they just throw it out the window. No universal translator, no babblefish, just everyone in the universe speaks English and understands English, with a few exceptions here and there, which is basically an impossibility. You can't get a language that exists today to occur naturally in a different place where other influences that we had here on Earth. So, yeah, it's absolutely never addressed. They just kind of like, yep, everyone speaks English. It just, it's one of those things like, hey, everyone speaks English across the universe. Why? Because we don't have the time to decipher languages. Every single episode, it would take forever. And I get it. As far as storytelling, you got to drop it because you would lose everyone by mid first season. After about 5 or 6 episodes of spending 10 to 20 minutes of them deciphering a language of an hour-long episode, you're going to get bored of this over and over again. So basically, the universe speaks English. That's it. Period. It's one of those things that, like, I get it as wanting to enjoy the stories, but from a logical standpoint, it does irritate me slightly, but I push that aside just like a couple other things, but just like don't even need to focus on it. So let's start with SG-1 Season 1. Now, this is what I would call the world building season. This is the season where a lot of things are introduced and things like that to build up the series of Stargate SG-1 and the franchise as a whole. It starts off the season and the series by Apophis, one of the other Goa'uld, getting into Stargate Command, which was shuttered because they only thought the Stargate went to Abydos and they just weren't going to go back. They said, okay, there's no need for us to go back. There's no advantage for going back. It's just, we're just going to keep it the status quo. We're just going to shut the gate down, shut the program down, and be done. That's inferred. It's never really spelled out exactly why it's done. It's just done. But that's the inference and the suggested reason for why Stargate is shut down. So when Apophis and some of his soldiers come in, they steal an airman, and they also go to Abydos and steal Shari, which is Daniel Jackson's wife, and Skara, the young boy that befriended Colonel Jack O'Neill in the movie. And they are implanted with symbiotes, with Goa'uld symbiotes, and are taken off-world. And because of this, they are able to convince Dr. Jackson to come back to Earth to join the team to find his missing family, the missing airmen, and to see what's going on in the universe. Because what they thought was a singular threat is now much larger than it was before. So with all this, they head to Apophis's planet once they figure out where it is, and they run into a group of people that they are trying to give symbiotes to and to bolster their numbers. This is where they run into Teal'c, seen here, and he is Apophis's first prime. Basically, he's Apophis's right-hand man. He's not a Goa'uld, but he's the one in charge of all the Jaffa and everything. And he's always, it's kind of alluded during it that he's always kind of like, I really don't think this guy's a god. I don't think Apophis is a god. But to say these things out loud would mean my death. And during their confrontation, they're able to pull Teal'c out and fight with them to free those people and to free others. Honestly, it was way too easy. That's just one of those things. It's like, oh, they did this. And I'm like, yeah, that was I mean, I get it. Even from his standpoint, it was still too easy. It's like he took a major risk that he even inferred that other people have tried to convince him of this before, but he believes them. Out of all people, he believes the SG-1 team. So here we go. And because of this kicks off the exploration and the knowledge of understanding of who the Goa'uld are for the Stargate Command teams, and starting to realize their place in the universe in relevance to all the alien races out there. This is where we see what's going on. We see the Asgard for the first time. They make an appearance. And this is where we start to see different races and we start to see where they brought a group of people to another planet that were definitely descendants from the Mongols. And I'm trying to think if there's any other specific ones. There's definitely some more modern Arab culture. It's not nondescript, but there's another planet that has a more modern Arab culture. I'd say like Middle Eastern Arab culture. I want to say modern, but Middle Eastern Arab culture. Oh, I mean Middle Ages era. And so there's things like that. Like they kept returning and populating planets with different cultures throughout time. And so this is kind of how we see this first season just kind of build up. And they eventually run into a race called the Tolan. Now the Tolan are descendants of Earth, obviously, but somehow got lost in the scheme of the Goa'uld, and their planet was just left alone. And they kind of seem to be following the same path as the agents. That science and technology is the primary drive for their culture, spirituality, all that is pushed aside, and they have advanced way beyond what our current technology is. And I know there's some inferences in there, but I won't get into that. But this is science fiction, people. Science fiction. So, and then we start to see the real world implications of a universal transportation system and how it impacts our country, how the government is perceiving it, how they want to use it for different things and different methods. And obviously they would. Like, hey, the government, U.S. government finds a new weapon. Ooh, they want it. The potential there and all this. And it starts to lay that groundwork of throughout the entire franchise on how the Stargate system works with the U.S. government that has it and the world governments as a whole. This comes into play. But this is all set up. This is what Season 1 is designed to do. Season 1 is designed to set up the franchise itself while doing lots of little independent stories and lots of fun jabs here and there. It's a great first season. You're kind of like, oh, you're starting to get really into it and you're starting to see all this fun stuff, and it's wonderful. But this is where it is. And so I really enjoy Season 1, but there isn't a clear, cohesive story except to find Shari and Skara. That's the main storyline that's kind of motivating Jackson and several of them to keep going out and looking. Well, you've got the military and government going, go out. There is a threat. We need to find technology and bring it back. But we have to do it diplomatically and try to develop, relationships with other races and cultures to build alliances across the universe now. So Earth went from one day just being, hey, there's us, to there's an entire universe. And that's a big, big step, and it explores all the impacts on this show. But afterwards, Season 2 through Season 4 is what we would call the System Lord arc. Now, the System Lords is what the major upper ranks of the Goa'uld race are. They're the ones that have the major god names like Ra, Apophis, Anubis, Hathor, and others that, rule over the lesser Goa'uld, kind of like the literal structure of the Egyptian mythology. And System Lords are the ones that are at the top tier. And this, over the next 3 seasons, is all about our battle with the System Lords and the System Lords' battle with the universe. Now that they know that, hey, Earth is out there, and they're kind of riling up everybody, and things are getting a little harder for us. And so that's where this starts. And it kicks off with a direct attack on Earth. Apophis and one of the System Lords try to attack Earth, but are pushed back by the Ancients. And because of this, we realize that Shari has become a host, and not only a host, but is pregnant with Apophis's child. Now, this is something that will come up throughout the storyline and will come up later in multiple places throughout the franchise. When 2 Goa'uld have a baby together, it is forbidden, but it has happened. They have a name for it. It's called a harcesis, and this means that the child will be born human because the 2 hosts are human, and not having a Goa'uld symbiote will retain the knowledge of all the Goa'uld. This means they have access to all the genetic memory and none of the allegiance to the Goa'uld species. And that's why it's forbidden. because they don't want someone like that being like, oh, well, I don't want a Gould, I don't want a symbiote, and side with some other race or faction or something like that, and have all the secrets of the Gould literally within themselves. So this is where we go, and they start to continue to explore, trying to rescue Shari, and this is where we get a lot of the conflict in the beginning of the story arc. Now, during all this search for Shari and Skara, they arrive on a planet with an ancient device. And O'Neill sticks his head in it to look in to see what it is, and it grabs him and downloads the entire knowledge of the ancients into his brain. It's kind of like shoving a boulder into the hole of a bowling ball. You can't really do it, and at any moment, if you were able to, once reality and physics set in, that brain's going to explode. And so Jack does kind of go crazy. And because of this, he built a device, basically from his subconscious, from this knowledge, to transport him to the Asgard home world. And when he arrives there, they are able to save him. And this is the turning point. This is where the Asgard realized that if humans were able to handle the knowledge of the ancients this long and able to get to them to save themselves, this puts them on the path to be the fifth race. Now, we talked about the four race alliance just a little bit ago, and this is where that comes in. Now, kind of what does this mean? This just means that the Asgard realized we're not just a small group of people. We're going to play a significant role in the future of the universe. So that's how this goes on. And so we're going through all this, and let's see. The Asgard realized that they'll continue to lend a helping hand from time to time, but they cannot be direct in dealing with the system lords because they don't have the ability to do it at this time because, as I mentioned previously when explaining the races, it's mentioned here that they are battling a race that is consuming their home world and is consuming their entire race, and that's the replicators. So as much as they would love to get rid of the Goa'uld like they originally wanted to with the four race alliance, they have a bigger direct threat on themselves. So they have to put that aside. They're like, we'd love to help you. We'll give you some info, a little bit of tech here and there, but we have to try to save ourselves. Then we can help you. Which is a very good philosophy that we should employ in most of our lives in government and politics and things like that. We need to help ourselves before we can help others, because then you lose both. So, as much as I want to take so much time in exploring this is 3 seasons worth of just conflict between Earth and the Goa'uld. There's so much. It's such a good story. We start to literally see the spelling out of the hierarchy, the relations between those system lords, between the different Goa'ulds, between the Tok'ra and the Goa'uld, and how they are battling each other, how they are infiltrating the Goa'uld and slowly, systematically taking out the Goa'uld. It also comes to a head where we see the government oversight start to come in. Okay, you can't just, Stargate Command exists and you've just been operating independently. No, we have to have some congressional oversight. And there also becomes a rogue faction within the government called the NID. I forget what the acronym stands for now. But basically, they're doing what SG-1 is, but throwing out ethics, morals, and anything that stands in the way. Their prime directive is to get alien technology into the hands of the U.S. government to defend Earth from alien threats by any means necessary, period. Full stop. So they're kind of the very gray, if not black, black, shadowy part of the government that is trying to get technology into the hands of Earth at no matter the cost, whether it loses us alliances and just gets us shut off from different areas of the universe. It doesn't matter. All that matters is Earth. And while that theory sounds good, the way they go about it is wrong, obviously. What comes about of this is we get a lot of different stories in this first in these 3 seasons of them trying to identify these people, and the Stargate SG-1 team having to go back to Worlds and fix what was done by this rogue group. So Stargate Command and the SG teams are actively looking for people to join them and make alliances, while also having to split their time fixing what the other groups have done. And this is like, it's split focus, and so it drags out a lot of what they're trying to do. And it makes great stories, but it is, from the Stargate Command perspective, very frustrating. And because of this, we see a lot of this throughout this series, and trying to identify them and put a stop to them. They eventually do. And because of this, the Asgard do eventually come back and help us directly. And you know what I just realized? I didn't tell you how this NID team, this Black Ops team, is working. There's more than one Stargate on Earth. Technically, throughout the series, we're going to find there's 3 that we know of, possibly more. But there's 3 that are found. One's found in Russia. And that's the gate that they're using to, when they're able to find out when they're not being, when the Stargate Command gate isn't active, they're using their gate to get to other worlds and back. And they're able to do it very covertly. And this is a contention. So we're going to see multiple Stargates on multiple planets, multiple systems come up a lot. But Earth seems to be the centralized area. Why is this? Because Earth was the primary seeding planet for the rest of the universe by the Goa'uld. They came to Earth and kept taking people and populating other planets and genetically modifying them to be their Jaffa. And Earth was the central location for humans in the Milky Way and in a major portion of multiple galaxies. It was us. If you wanted humans, you had to get them from Earth. So a lot of this is taking place here, and that's why there's multiple gates. They've had to come here, rebuild a gate, or bring a gate to reestablish that link. Every time we revolted and buried it, they had to bring another one. So that's why we're going to see a lot of this. So eventually, like I said before, the Tok'ra and the Asgard come in and basically destroy Apophis's army, his fleet, everything, and put him out to pasture, so to speak. Because at the time, he was the strongest system lord. He controlled how all the others acted, and he was the head honcho. And because of this, we get a whole new story arc. Because, I mean, we're only 4 seasons in, and not very far into this video, but I promise you, it gets weird, but so good with this next story arc. And that next story arc is what I like to call the Anubis story arc. And this is another 3 seasons, seasons 5 through 8. And Anubis is the god of the dead, essentially, in Egypt mythology. And he becomes the major system lord. He comes back into existence because for a long time everyone thought he was dead or banished to another universe. No one had seen Anubis for millennia, and they just thought he was gone and done with. So this is where we get it, and this is where so much more understanding and expansion of the franchise comes from, is from this story arc. Now, throughout all these seasons, we see so many side stories that aren't directly related to the major storyline, and that's great. And this is how season 5 starts off. It's kind of like, oh, we finally got Apophis out of the way. Let's not. We're going to still be diligent and keep doing, because we never know what's coming, which is a good philosophy to have, in my opinion. Let's just keep going and keep checking this out. So here we see one of the biggest meta storylines in existence. What happens is there's an alien who comes to Earth who's human, but from a different race somewhere. He comes to Earth, and his cohorts decide that they don't want to go back because they're in the middle of a war. They're defectors. And because this one guy, he's a little sketchy, like he's a little nervous, he's a little twitchy, they think he might send a signal and let them know that they're still alive and come get them and conscript them back into war. So they're like, okay, they wipe his memory, so he thinks he's human, and he just acts like he's human. And so eventually, after running into the SG team and realizing that he's an alien, he's like, okay, I don't want to go to war either, but I'm just going to try to be my weird self here on Earth. And he becomes a TV producer and creates a show called Wormhole Extreme that is essentially a very, very low budget version of Stargate SG-1 inside itself. So, in the Stargate SG-1 show, they create a show about SG-1. And it's hilarious. Because they start to be like, why is the government letting them do this? They're like, aren't people going to ask questions and things like that? And they're like, no. It's plausible deniability. Anytime someone's like, oh, we heard about that Stargate. We heard about a Stargate thing that lets you travel. Oh, you mean that TV show? You're thinking about that TV show? And then they kind of like eye the camera, a couple of fourth wall breaks, kind of eyeing the camera like, yeah, if you talk about there's a real Stargate in real life, we're just going to say it's Stargate SG-1 you're thinking about. It's great. I mean, it's just so hilarious. You're just watching it, you're like, this is so bizarre and so funny. Because you're like, yep, that makes sense. Hey, there's really is a Stargate. We better make a show about it, so if anyone asks questions, we can just point them to the show. You're just thinking about that show. Don't worry about it. It's no big deal. I mean, really, that's kind of how this is just in the downtime before anything major happens. This is just what's going on in the world of Stargate. And it's hilarious. It's one of those few episodes that you watch and you're like, oh, this is cringe and it's funny and it's hard to watch. But the more you watch it, the funnier it gets. It's just, yeah, this is truly being meta. I can never say that. I keep trying to pronounce the Indian last name Meta because I have several friends with it, but Meta. And it is so funny. And they're so self-aware of who they are as a show. It's great. But because of this, eventually ends, and they gotta kick off a new bad. If we're gonna keep a story going, we're gonna keep a series going, you have to have a big confrontation. Then enters Anubis. Anubis returns from the universe being absent for such a long time, like I said before, and it turns out later, that we learn later in the series, that he has a weird appearance. He looks almost ghost-like. And kind of like he's got a hooded cloak, and his face is very obscured. You can't really see who he is. And the reason this is because Anubis tricked one of the ancients into helping him ascend. So basically, it's kind of like a demon tricked an angel into getting him into heaven. It's basically the story. And then they realized what they did, and they kicked him out. But they didn't kick him out all the way. Something went wrong. Something went awry. And so now he's stuck halfway between ascension and mortality, the mortal plane. So that's why he's got this ghost-like appearance. He's kind of there, but not there, kind of more ethereal. But because of this, he also retains the knowledge of the ancients. So basically, he is now the most powerful being in the universe. Because he's got extended life, unfathomable knowledge of the universe and technology and things like that he's able to tap into, making him probably the worst villain in the Stargate franchise. Now, because of this gives us a lot of need to understand the ancients and ascension and things like that. And that's where all this is laid out. Now, right at the end of this season, once it starts to come out, Daniel ascends with the help of one of the agents. He ascends. He dies from radiation and ascends. Don't worry. Don't worry. Now, this was written into the storyline because apparently the actor, Michael Shanks, had a lot of creative differences, and the lack of use of his character in the story and in the show, they basically, all right, fine, we'll write you out. We'll give you a nice out. And so basically, boom, he's gone. They write him out. He ascends. So basically, okay, character gone, but not quite. In season 6, he makes a couple of appearances as an ascended being, a couple times to talk to Jack. And because of this, I guess they started to work things out creatively. But during the meantime, we've got a hole in the SG-1 team. So while traveling to a planet, they come across a very intelligent savant genius of another humanoid race named Jonas Quinn. And because of his position, he's kind of ostracized because he was the one that said, hey, we're not alone. And whoa, here, I'm proven right. They still didn't like him, so he joins the SG-1 team. Basically as a researcher because he's kind of shunned from his people. But eventually joins the SG-1 team through season 6. So I don't have a picture of him there's not a picture promotionally of him that I have up, but I'll put one up here. And what happens is, while on mission, they run into what are called, they have a specific name and it escapes me now, but they're called super soldiers. That's what they refer to them as. They are Gould injected, they are hosts with Goulds in them that are half ascended. Somewhat genetically, they're kind of human, kind of not, kind of Gould, kind of not, but are given these super suits that basically make them invulnerable. And this is Anubis's army that they start to encounter. They're like, who are these people? Why are we getting all this guff? Who in the world sent these? And it takes a lot to take them down. They eventually find some weaknesses, but as the weaknesses are found, the new ones correct that and things like that. So they are truly super soldiers that can't be killed. And then that's when they realize they got to figure out something. And then they come to a planet that has ancient writing and realize that there's a tablet that shows the way to an ancient repository of knowledge and weapons of the ancients. And this could stop Anubis and protect Earth. So that becomes their driving force through season 6. We got to find these weapons. We got to find this stuff, and it's so fun. It's just it's so final if we don't. If we don't find this, Earth is doomed. I mean, it is high stakes, and with the System Lords, it was kind of high stakes. They might do it, but this is like Earth is gone, the universe is destroyed, and Anubis is left if they don't figure this out. So they start to look for the ancient city, and that's when we get into season 7. Now, just double check here. Yeah. Okay. This is, I guess, when the creative differences are resolved. Because Daniel Jackson's back. Ha ha! Somehow, Daniel Jackson survived. Sorry, couldn't help myself. No, actually, they did a much better job than that. Jackson wanted to help his friends, but he couldn't do it as Ascended because of their rule of non-interference with the mortal plane. They could not interfere. So he elected to be sent back, but because of this, he would not retain the ancient knowledge. He would be fully human again, but they kind of went overboard and he forgot everything. And slowly he starts to remember who he was. But that's how he comes back, more than just a single line of dialogue in a very bad movie. They actually put a thought into it and how to bring him back. And it's kind of weird, but hey, we see they kind of did that with Anubis, so works. It fits in the lore, fits in the story. We're good to go. It wasn't just a one-line dialogue to explain something. Good job, Stargate. You know what you're doing. You have creative talent on your team. Good job. So, now that Daniel Jackson is back, they start to continue to put all their efforts into finding this ancient repository of knowledge and weapons, only to find out that it is hidden on Earth in Atlantis. Yes, Atlantis. Where's Atlantis? Oh, it's in Antarctica. Under the ice. Why this did not spawn like 100 different expeditions to current day Antarctica to look for it baffles me, but I'm sure there's some conspiracy theorists looking into it. But yes, that's what they write it into. There's an ancient base, and I think there's actually a couple documentaries that they think there's hidden pyramids under Antarctica's ice. I'll have to look into that later. But yeah, so they find a Stargate in Antarctica that looks different and is powered by something completely different. This is the setup for Stargate Atlantis, because it allows them to connect to a different galaxy. Not just a different planet within the Milky Way, but a different galaxy. But this is housed within an ancient base that gives them the weapons. Well, specifically one. They're drones. They're ancient drones that attack and repel Anubis. Now, with the Asgard and the replicators kind of being finally pushed back by the Asgard, here we come to this point and this conclusion of everything coming to a head all at once at the end of the story arc in the end of season 8. That Anubis is gone, the replicators are gone, the Asgard are decimated, and realize that the humans are going to be the key to their long-term survival and their way to live on in the universe through their knowledge by passing it on to us. And with this, we see them help us get to the Pegasus Galaxy for Stargate Atlantis to kick off. Now, Season 8 in Stargate SG-1 coincides with Stargate Atlantis Season 1. So, for 3 seasons, they run concurrently, back to back. And there's a little bit of crossover, but not a whole lot. But definitely characters come in and out through both series in the last 3 seasons of Stargate SG-1. So now, let's talk about the last 2 seasons of what I alluded to previously, and that is the Ori story arc. Now, this is one of those ones that major changes, major shifts, and I do like it. Like, I don't have complaints about the changes per se, or the story changes. Everything stays true to the lore, to the established canon, but it's becomes a little more existential, a little more religion bad type messaging at the beginning, but I think they kind of corrected it at the end. That's kind of gets the feel, but they do the right thing and push it back, because you don't want to do that. That's just mean and wrong. But this is where we get Samantha Carter and Jack O'Neill to step aside. And Daniel Jackson. All 3 step aside. Teal'c goes home to deal with the goings-on of the Jaffa Nation and things like that. So, because the SG-1 team has split and they're going their separate ways, they hire Colonel Cameron Mitchell to take over SG-1. He comes in thinking he's going to get Carter, Jackson, and Teal'c, and he's excited. He's dreamed about this for a while. He's been part of the 302 team that saved them in Atlantis, at the Atlantis Antarctic base, and he's really excited to be on the front lines. He can't wait, only to realize that, they're all gone. So the first couple episodes is basically Mitchell going back and recruiting Carter, Jackson, until back onto the SG-1 team, which he does, and they start doing their thing. And if you're unfamiliar, he was also the lead character in a series called Farscape. And the second leading role would be the next person to join the SG-1 team, Vala Maldaran. These 2 actors were in the entire Farscape series. Great series. You should go watch it. I started watching it again after I got done with this because, come on. You can't not to. When you see the 2 main actors from another show and another show, you kind of got to go back. But Vala Maldaran is a con artist that kind of takes a liking to Dr. Jackson and kind of, literally shackles herself to him to find a treasure that she's looking for, and over time she simply joins the team. They're like, we're going to all these different places, and we're starting to see these Ori come in, and these priors, they're basically their Jaffa leading into our universe, so we need kind of your knowledge of where we're going. So she becomes part of the team. But I will point out that almost no one gets this reference, but do watch it with Season 9 in mind. I don't want to spoil where it happens, but you'll know it when it happens. And it's an homage to MASH. And you're like, what? I've referenced MASH a couple times already, that Stargate is the MASH of the Stargate sci-fi universe. And one of the Master Chiefs that he's always at the gate, he's always the one saying Chevron 1 encoded, Chevron 2 encoded. You see him, and they call him Walter. His real name's Walter. And Walter also has a particular character in MASH called Walter is Radar. And Radar has a very peculiar ability in MASH to see things coming before they happen. That's where he got the nickname Radar. Before the colonel would ask for a piece of paper or something, he'd be like, oh, here it is. Before he even asks, he's like, let me ask the question. They do an homage to this, and every time I watch it, I laugh hysterically. And if you aren't familiar with MASH, you're just kind of like, okay, what is this? This is weird. But as a MASH fan, as someone who's watched the entire series at least a couple dozen times, if you watch MASH, turn off the audio, laugh track. It's an option on the DVDs. Trust me, you'll thank me for it. It's even funnier. We don't have that stupid laugh track interrupting you. But this is just one of those things I have to point out because it kills me every single time I watch it. And it's just one of my favorite clips of the later seasons of Stargate. It's just this little homage. It's wonderful. I know that's a big sidetrack and a big rabbit trail. I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep them to a minimum. So let's get back. Let's get back on track. The Ori are the big bad, and we talked about them earlier, and they're the offshoot of the Ancients. And they have a book of origin that they're reading from and handing out to people, saying this is the one truth of the universe. It has all these stories. I mean, there's a lot of correlation to a specific group of people of religious faith in this, and I get it from a story standpoint, but they kind of lean too hard into it at times, but they do bring it back. And so they realize these people are the big bad for the concluding seasons of this show. They are trying to battle the Ori. They're trying to find a way to communicate with the Ancients to stop them, but they won't. And then now they're trying to find a way to stop the Ori and push them out, stop them, destroy them. And this is where a lot of the fun begins, diving into a different mythology altogether that we haven't seen before, and that's the King Arthur mythology. This is fun because in the Stargate universe, Merlin, Morgan Le Fay were ancients that came back, that left their ascension, came back to Earth to help prepare weapons and technology eventually for when the Ori come to Earth. And this is just kind of that foresight. You're like, oh. And they do a lot of fun stuff with the whole King Arthur mythos. It's great. It's very funny. It's very lighthearted, but it's also respectful. But it is interesting. You're like, okay, we've done ancient Egypt. We've done the Norse gods. We've done several other cultures and mythologies, and boom. I think they kind of got like, you know what? We really haven't talked about King Arthur. That's one of the greatest mythos in human history, is the King Arthur legend. Let's get that in there. And sure enough, they did, and it's great. There's a lot of stories about it. But basically, they're trying to take technology that was and blueprints left for them by Merlin to create a weapon to destroy the Ori. Now, we can go into a lot more detail on it, but like I said, I'm trying to keep this video under 6 hours, so we're going to blaze through this last story arc because I like it, but of all of them, this is my least favorite. I don't hate it, it's just my least favorite. Like, if I ranked them all, this is at the bottom, but I still like it. And basically, what this is they're going to different worlds trying to convince these people they're being subjugated by the Ori. Literally, if you don't convert to their religion, they wipe you out, which I thought was a parallel to another one that I didn't think they'd have the guts to try, but they did. So they added that little aspect into it, and sure enough, here we go. And so the Ori are based out of another galaxy, and so as they're coming in, they have all these followers in this other galaxy, and as they're coming into the Milky Way and making their presence known, it's getting to the point where Earth can't stand by and are losing planets in alliances and under Ori's controlling them at an alarming rate. And because of this, peoples are just, okay, fine, we realize you are more powerful than us. If we don't submit, you're going to wipe us out. We don't want to die. So sure enough, they side with the Ori. And they use these worlds to build ships in their universe. And that wasn't going fast enough. They couldn't build their own spaceships in our universe fast enough. So this is one of those things where we kind of see something you didn't really expect, and that is the Ori take the Stargate technology and dial it up to 11. What do I mean by that? Well, they need to get their forces into the Milky Way to take over the Milky Way, so then get more followers, more people worship him, so the Ori can gain more power. The only way to do that now, at a fast enough pace to keep ahead of everyone in the Milky Way galaxy from stopping their advancement, is to literally get their current ships into our galaxy. So they build a supergate. And what I mean by a supergate, they build a Stargate that is extremely massive, that is powered by a black hole, that is so huge, they're able to fly their spaceships through it. Now, this is one of those things that's kind of like, it's almost comical to watch, but you're kind of like, I get it. Like, while you're watching, like, okay, this all makes sense. But when you stop and think, like, wow, that's pretty funny, pretty dumb, stupid, maybe, don't know. Could be, maybe not. This is the tone for the last 3 seasons, the Ori arc. You're kind of like, oh, that makes sense. Wait, does it? I don't know. Kinda? I mean, that's why it's my least favorite, is it's because you're kind of like, they're all over the place, but it all fits. Just kind of more like a first grader's drawing, you know? It all fits. It looks, you can tell exactly what it is, but you got questions. Not bad questions. You just need a little more explanation here and there. They kind of just gloss over the supergate pretty easy. Where's this come from? Oh, how are they powering it? Black hole. From where? Doesn't matter. And how is it being powered by a black hole and the supergate on the other side now being sucked in by that black hole? Yeah, let's not talk about that. Let's just ignore the excitement. This is happening. Oh, okay, this is happening. And that's the fun part of the last few seasons. It's kind of like, why are we doing this? How are we doing this? Okay, that's interesting. And there's so much I'm going to leave out of the story arc, because if I explain some of the cool things that I like about it, it's going to ruin some of the fun things you will have watching it. So I'm going to skip over those. But even though I kind of ruined the Supergate for you, I'm sorry. But in the end, the Stargate team banishes the Ori with the weapon built by Merlin, which is called the Sangral, I believe. Don't ask me to spell it. I can't do it. And they're able to basically wipe out the Ori themselves. Now, the Priors, their soldiers, are still out in the universe and still have their power and abilities. Somehow, they do. Oh, yeah. We're not going to talk about that one either. And their power comes from the Ori, but the Ori are gone, but they have their power. So like I said, the last few seasons get a little wonky and trying to keep things consistent. Sorry, had to point that one out. That just sticks in my head the entire time. And it comes down to they're able to push back the priors and stop the advancements of the Milky Way. And the soldiers that came to the Milky Way with the priors to take over the Milky Way galaxy are shown the truth of the Ori. And their revelation is, yeah, the Ori were bad, but this book, the Book of Origins, has some really good moral guidance in it. So we're going back to our galaxy to do one thing, and that's rebuild what was destroyed and to reconstruct ourselves apart from them, but goodly and rightly with the morals from the Book of Origin, which was something I didn't see coming, and I thought that was a very great way to end that story and that story arc. And it literally ends with them walking through the gate again, to allude that the Stargate program still goes on after season 10. We're just not going to see it anymore. Well, we do. We see the SG-1 team a couple more times, but that's okay. It's fun. So that brings us to the super fast, super broad stroke, so much covered in so little time, 10 full seasons of Stargate SG-1. One of the best sci-fi shows ever to make its debut on our television screens. And still holds up to this day. And even though it's not perfect, it's still great.
Oh, yeah. That'll play. How far is Alaris, anyway?
Several billion miles away.
That's gotta be a record.
Colonel O'Neill, what the hell are you doing? In the middle of my backswing?
Okay, so let's jump into the Stargate series that hardly anybody knows about. In fact, I didn't know about it until I started looking into everything Stargate for this video, and that is Stargate Infinity. Now, this was made about 5 seasons into Stargate SG-1, and I really didn't know this existed till this year at all. And this series takes place about 30 years into the future of Stargate SG-1 and is primarily geared towards children and is a children's cartoon show with the fable format, where each episode has a theme that teaches morals and kindness, judging people on their appearance, greed, and the like. And there's an overarching villain race, the Tlacan. I think I said that right. And the Ancient is not the Ancients as we know them, but an dragon-like figure. A winged dragon-like figure with a tail that kind of floats around and flies around the team. And it's really hard to watch, honestly, because if you're a Stargate fan, it's kind of like, what am I watching? It's very cringy. But it's Stargate, so a lot of fans turned out for it, but there's a reason it only lasted a season. And that's because it was just really off the wall, kind of bonkers, and even the story trying to stay true to Stargate, where there's villains, there's a story, they're traveling to different worlds. It just never seemed to work. It was just simply a children's show that is not recognized as canon, but it does exist. So I had to talk about it just a little bit. And really, honestly, when it comes down to it, this is one of those things you can sit there and go, nope, and continue on. But if you want to consume everything that's Stargate, you got to put this on your list. So Now let's talk about Stargate Atlantis. Now this is a fan favorite, and this is where I was introduced to Jason Momoa for the first time, and we have a lot going on in this series. So I'm first going to start out with talking about the three major alien races that we deal with in the series. The first is the Wraith. The Wraith are a humanoid species and survive by draining the life force from humans. They originally were a bug that fed on humans for so long and over the centuries started to take on human characteristics, so that's what we get to see today. And they still keep a hive-like social structure where there's a queen who commands a bunch of drones. Now, many hives exist and hibernate in different links, so humans are not completely wiped out as their food source. This would be a fair comparison would be like the cicadas. Now, the second group is called the Genii. Now, the Genii are a human species somewhat slightly disconnected and removed from the ancients, but they are humanoids in the Pegasus galaxy, and they're the most technologically advanced race of humans in this galaxy. But because of this, they're very arrogant and strive for the power to be the strongest force in the galaxy. And because of this simple thing, they do not like the Atlanteans. They feel they are being rescued and they're going to overtake their power. They see them as rivals and not allies. So the Atlantis team becomes their enemy quite quickly. And this is just how this structure is built. Now, the third race is what are called the Assyrians, and they're basically replicators 2.0. Now, what happened is a long time ago, the ancients were trying to build nanites to destroy and kill the Wraith. And they started replicating and they started interlocking just like the original replicators, and they developed human form to imitate their creators. So without realizing it, the ancients would not be able to use them because they were not effective. So they attempted to destroy their creation. However, many escaped, and the few that survived created a planet on Osiris and developed a society that was a direct reflection of how the ancients built their society, their technology, their architecture, everything. By all outward appearances, they looked like the ancients. Everything about them looked like the ancients. So, a faction becomes fully committed to ascending. And this is a little side story, but there becomes a divide between the Assyrians where one group wants to ascend even though they're artificial beings, and the others still want to just have nothing to do. They just want to exist and continue to live the way they've always lived without ever confronting the Wraith. And you kind of get it. They just want to live their life. They were created for a specific purpose. They decided they didn't want to do it and were able to rewrite their programming to stop it. So Atlantis begins in SG-1 Season 8. Yes. And there's a little crossover event between SG-1 and Stargate Atlantis. And from time to time, Stargate Command travels to the Pegasus Galaxy and vice versa. And the reason they're able to do this is they unlocked the ability to open an 8th chevron from Earth to send them to the Pegasus Galaxy. Now, here we find that here when they arrive, they find an abandoned Atlantean base that they take on as their own, continuing to learn the technology and to utilize the technology to combat the Wraith. But by stepping into the Atlantis base, it signaled and awoken all the Wraith hives, and this becomes kind of the major setting for the entire series. And in this series, although not all pictured here, we have various actors and characters. Primarily, the original cast is Elizabeth Weir, who's the commander, Rodney McKay, who's kind of the resident genius like Samantha Carter was, John Shepard taking on the military role like Richard Dean Anderson, and Aidan Ford, another military guy, Carson Beckett, the doctor, and Taylor Imogen, who is a local indigenous person on the planet they found the Atlantean base. Now, Atlantis has two major overarching story arcs, and we're going to cover them both real quickly so we don't keep this video like 8 hours long. The first was what we would call the Wraith Genii story arc. Atlantis starts exploring the Pegasus galaxy. First, they're befriended by the Athosians, who Taylor is from, and their presence awakens the Wraith from hibernation. This produces large-scale turmoil throughout the Pegasus galaxy. They encounter the Genii directly within the first few episodes, and they are unaware of their technological prowess because they've spent a large amount of time hiding their technological advancements from everyone. When Season 1 ends and Season 2 begins, Atlantis survives a direct Wraith attack. So, Season 1 is just simply exploring, and the Wraith finally figure out where they are, and they come to attack. And they attack directly with their hive ships. And because of this, they try to get reinforcements from Earth. It doesn't go well. And all of a sudden, Ford goes missing because he's taken up by the Wraith darts. And after being cold, Ford is replaced by Ronan Dex. And Ronan Dex is played by Jason Momoa. He is a outlaw from another race that is running from the Wraith. He's considered a runner. They tagged him and set him loose, kind of playing like the most dangerous game. And because of this, we have a whole new dynamic. We have a slightly new dynamic, and from which the series pulls from. But also, shortly after, we find Ford again. Ford is now partially Wraith. He was fed upon while he was being abducted, so his DNA got altered, so he's like quarter Wraith, not quite half, but he's disfigured and has the hunger for the Wraith enzyme, which gives him superhuman abilities, strength, speed, enhances all his natural abilities. And with Ford running around, he's hunting Wraith on his own because he's too volatile, too crazy to be trusted by the Atlantis team again. And so because of that, he starts his own little band of rogues to combat the Wraith, kind of like in a guerrilla style warfare. And with that going on, we get the Genii are now going through their split. Surprise, this is a common theme throughout Stargate. There's always a divide and split. So the Genii are wanting to become allies with the Atlantean team and stop being enemies for the betterment of the galaxy, of the Pegasus galaxy, I should say. but they're a small faction, and they cannot win over until they get some of the leaders out of the way. And Carson starts developing this anti-Wraith solution. And first it was to help Ford bring him back to being fully human, and then they started to realize they could weaponize it by removing the bug DNA from Wraith, turning Wraith fully human again. And this anti-Wraith retrovirus was a huge game changer and becomes a huge plot point, because now the Atlantean team can stop the Wraiths in their tracks from doing all this fun stuff like feeding on the galaxy and stop fighting each other. They can now turn a hive human and let another hive feed on that hive that was turned human. So because of this, they created a test subject. And what was his name? Oh, well, I didn't write it in my notes. I can see him. He was the actor he was on Stargate Enterprise, Star Trek Enterprise, but I'm blanking on his name. It'll come to me later. But they converted one person and sent him back. Not sent him back. My apologies. They created him, and Michael. There we go. I knew it'd come to me essential. Michael, and they tried to convince him he was human. He just lost his memory, and once he realized, he escaped. And when he escaped, the retrovirus started not working because he wasn't getting regular doses, and became not fully Wraith, not fully human, but definitely more Wraith than Ford. And he started trying to get back to his hive, but because of his alterations, they didn't really want him, so he kind of formed his own group again. So now we've got another splinter in the Wraith Collective. So before this, Michael recruits his faction to come back to Atlantis to improve that retrovirus again, like I said before, to turn a hive human. And this is where things get weird. The Wraith actually come to Atlantis, and they start sharing information on a lot of topics. So the Atlanteans are getting a lot of information, and we're going through it, and they're not giving everything, but the Wraith and the humans are working temporarily together to solve the civil war between the hives, because there's just not enough humans for the Wraith collectively to feed on in the galaxy. So two Wraith hive ships start fighting it out after one is turned human, and it is partially successful. But this plan comes to a full stop after the first attempt, because another Wraith hive has decided, if we can't find food source here, we know those humans came from another galaxy, let's go there. So two Wraith hive ships start heading towards the Milky Way, and they start heading towards Earth. Now this gets a little weird, and there's a lot backstory to this, but this is just a reminder of what happens. So we have to see that they've got this super hive ship that is being created by their technology to be bigger, badder, and much more effective against human technology and even Atlantean technology, and it is steaming towards Earth. And they have to pause about halfway for a short time. And this kind of stays this way till the end of the series. And we'll get to that shortly. So now the major second story arc is the Replicator arc. And this is the Assyrians and what they're doing and how they're existing and the confrontation between the Atlantis team and them. So basically, honestly, I think the Replicators 2.0 is kind of, it's lazy writing. It's like we've done this again. This is my only major complaint against the Atlantis series. But they do it well. So after they find the planet of the ancients and what is considered the planet of the ancients, which is Asura, and they start looking into who they are, they realize they are replicators and not actually Atlanteans. And they come back to Atlantis to take back control. So the Asurans take over the Atlantis base for a short time. And Rodney sets up a plan using 34 Stargates after they finally kick out the replicators of the base. And with these 34 Stargates, this is kind of interesting. They create basically a Stargate tunnel, kind of like a subway between the Pegasus galaxy and the Milky Way galaxy. So instead of taking 2 weeks, it takes about 30 minutes. And this actually plays in a lot because it allows for more transfer, more personnel, and other things. So we get returning characters from the Stargate SG-1 series coming to Atlantis and vice versa. And it's quite interesting. And during this time, during this construction time and all this, we sadly lose Weir and Carson. And Weir is replaced with Samantha Carter. Great, love her, glad she's back, but unfortunately she's only there for a short time. And Jennifer Keller becomes the new doctor to replace Carson. So Atlantis is now fighting the Wraith and the Replicators at this time. The Genii are kind of off doing their own thing. They're fighting the Wraith, but they have backed off the Atlanteans for now. And the Replicators start attacking Atlantis because they know they exist, they know where their base is located, and after being kicked out, they're like, we can't have them. The Atlantis team wants them to fulfill their programming and destroy the Wraith so the galaxy can be safe. But in doing so, the Replicators become a bigger threat to Atlantis than the Wraith. So, after their direct attack, Atlantis launches its base into space. And when they do this, they relocate to a different planet. Now, one thing about this is they don't really address how this changes all their dialing sequences because their original planet is not part of the Stargate network. They don't address it. They're just like, yep, we moved, everything stays the same. We're just going to ignore that little fact. And that's okay, I guess. I mean, as Stargate fans, we're used to some things. Like I said, back in SG-1, they just ignore the fact that everyone speaks English now. So, finally, after a new planet, Atlantis makes an alliance with a few hives, and they start fighting against the Replicators. So now the Wraith are fighting with the Atlantis team to stop the Replicators, and because of this, they are able to defeat the Replicators eventually with the help of Rodney. Now, they basically turn their attraction of all the technology from the previous series where they had the disruptor that would disrupt their connections and make all the replicators fall to pieces. They flip it and make it attract and basically have all the replicator technology being forced to combine and collect into a single point, making it basically collapse in on itself, killing the replicators. Great. Now there's some more story arcs with this that are very interesting, but are not really necessary to the overlying story. So we'll move on from those. But after Carter is shortly reassigned after a few episodes back to Earth, we get Woolsey, Richard Woolsey, who, if you remember, is played by Richard Picardo. He's from the IOA Oversight Committee from Stargate SG-1, and he is running Atlantis now. Now, Woolsey is a very pragmatic. He was often viewed as confrontational and kind of an enemy in Stargate SG-1, but really he's more, we need to do things and do things right. We need to do it the right way. And this often butted heads in SG-1 and in Stargate Atlantis. But in my opinion, this is where the character really kind of grows. You see, he's not just some weird bureaucrat trying to keep control of the Stargate program. He really truly wants it to succeed. But he has staunch lines that he wants to draw in the sand, saying we cannot cross this line, and these are the things we have to do. So I really do like Woolsey in this role. I loved Weir, but I do think he was probably the best commander for Stargate Atlantis. I know it's a hot take, and some people are going to disagree with me. That's okay. We're all allowed our opinions. And let's just go on from that, shall we? So everything finally comes to an head after these two story arcs, and we go back to the Wraith wanting to get back to the Pegasus Galaxy. I mean, to the Milky Way Galaxy. They were stopped before, and now, through an episode that is really bizarre. It's bizarre. Basically, it takes you a minute to figure out what's going on. But basically, the episode in question is an alternate reality, and in this, a Wraith is already on Earth. And he is building a communication device to tell the Wraith Hive the exact location of Earth. And in doing so, with a major explosion, this transmission gets sent. Not just sent in his dimension, but across all alternate realities, all alternate parallel dimensions. That signal gets sent, and it gets sent to ours. And so now, the major hive is coming right for Earth. And the Wraiths get new ZPMs, and they're powering up their super hive that is being built on the fly. It's growing, it's attaching new technology, developing bigger armor, better weapons, and it is most definitely a major threat to Earth. And all this comes to a head when Atlantis decides the only way to stop this is to fly Atlantis to Earth. So the Atlantis base takes off again into space, traveling, beating the hive ship to Earth, and destroying it, forcing it to land on Earth because it's depleted. And this is where the Atlantis series wraps up. And I do apologize for such a quick summation of Atlantis because there's so much to explore on this. I may do it in a later time, but we got more stuff to cover.
Oh my God.
Did you see that?
Yes, what the?
I'm fine. Look, Beckett's gene therapy worked.
I was able to activate this. It's a personal shield. Acts like a protective skin. And it must have inertial dampening properties, too, because I didn't feel a thing. Watch this. Hit me. Oh, God! I didn't have to swing so hard. And I noticed that he didn't even hesitate.
I'm still trying to understand how you thought it was a good idea to test this device by having someone throw you off a balcony.
Oh, believe me, that's not the first thing we tried.
I shot him. In the leg.
So let's rewind a bit. We're going back to SG-1 again with the movie Ark of Truth. Now, some say this is the final conclusion, of the SG-1 series and not Continuum. And we'll talk about Continuum next. But this is the first major movie release after SG-1 ended. So, simply put, SG-1 went looking for the Ark of Truth to purge all of the Ori abilities bestowed on their followers, bring the knowledge of the truth of reality, who the Ori were. And after succeeding, many of the followers returned to their galaxy in the knowledge of who the Ori were. Now, this is kind of a very short synopsis, but that's it in a nutshell. They go back and they're convinced that, okay, the Ori were wrong, but the Book of Origin has a lot of good writing in it, good morals, and good things to live by. And they're going back to their galaxy to teach the Book of Origin on moral principles and not to worship the Ori. Now, this is pretty good. This has a lot of talk about it because there's so much allegory in the real world of all the religious texts, kind of just like there is no God, here's the morals we should live by. And so a lot of people were slightly offended by this, but we got to remember this is a science fiction series. Okay? This isn't the real world. But it is an interesting story because this is just really an extended episode of Stargate SG-1 that probably should have been the final episode for the series. And I do think this is a good ending, that if you want to say this is the ending to end Stargate SG-1, I completely agree. But we do have to talk about the last movie. Okay, let's talk about it. Stargate Continuum. This is the movie that I think probably shouldn't have been made. I don't hate that it was made, but it wasn't needed. And the reason is because it involves time travel, and the movie ends exactly where it begins. So, it's one of those, hey, we did all this stuff, and if this one little thing didn't happen, we wouldn't have a story to tell. So what it is it's at the removal ceremony of the symbiote from the final ball clone. And what they don't realize is there was one ball left who went back in time to stop the transportation of the original Stargate from Egypt to America. And once that happens, it changes the timeline. However, our cast, Carter, Daniel, Teal'c, and are put back in the main timeline, but out of place. They're temporal anomalies, I believe is the correct term. So they're trying to fit in, but they're not allowed to interact with each other until eventually the Goa'uld show up at Earth. And when the Goa'uld show up at Earth, Ball is the almighty power of the System Lords, and he is in control because of all the knowledge he has gained from the other timeline. He's able to take control to combat all the enemies that the Goa'uld would face over the last 10 years. and he has become the ultimate power in the universe. Eventually, the SG-1 team devises a plan, resetting time by traveling back in time to stop this gate from being stolen by using the second gate. Now, when they do this, they end up right back at the exact ceremony at the beginning of the movie. This is one of those things like, hey, it's an interesting story, but it's something that, honestly, if you had to skip something in Stargate that wasn't Infinity, this is what you should skip, because it was kind of comes off like a fanfic storyline. It really does. But they made it anyways, and so I watched it. But I do think this is just one of those where you just go, yep, we're good, we're done, and let's move on. Now let's talk about the redheaded stepchild that is Stargate Universe. And some people love it, some people hate it. I'm actually both. I absolutely loved it when it first came out, and during rewatch I can see, oh, not a big a fan of it as I remember, but I do enjoy it. I seem to enjoy it a lot better on initial release. But that's because this series is unlike any of the other Stargate series, shows, spin-offs, movies, anything. This is completely different. And it has a post-apocalyptic vibe with kind of that taking some cues from Lost, and which divided a lot of people. And I do applaud them for going such a departure from the standard formula from Stargate, but doing that did leave a lot of bad taste in a lot of other people's mouths, and I get it. Now, because of this divergence of the formula, you get a story that is very unique and very interesting and very engaging. However, to push it takes a lot of liberties and a lot of stretches, and that's where I think after rewatching it, I kind of got that feeling. I really want to love this more than I do. I want to love it as much as the first time as I watched it, but I don't. So basically, the entire cast pretty much stays the same. But really, there's three characters that everything revolves around, and that's Dr. Nicholas Rush, Colonel Everett Young, and Eli Wallace. Now, these three are the whole reason for this series. These three characters make everything happen in this series. And because Stargate SGU is so different, and they are traversing the universe in a ship, there actually isn't, quote unquote, a major race that they're battling against. They're really battling against surviving and trying to find a way home. So, let's kind of just, there's no real major story arcs, so we're just going to break this down by season and just kind of look at it. So, season 1, they recruit Eli, last Starfighter style. They put a mathematical problem that needs to be solved into a video game to unlock the 9th chevron. And really, that's kind of funny, but that's how he's just kind of he's this genius that just doesn't really get no motivation, doesn't know what he wants to do. And so Jack O'Neill and and the doc show up and be like, okay, we're going to make you come with us, because he didn't want to sign anything, because he's like, I hate the government, blah, 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 blah. And once they transport him to, I believe, the Daedalus, he signs on immediately. And so he begins working with Dr. Rush to finish the equation for the power requirements to power the Night Chevron to get them to this address, which eventually is the ship Destiny. Now, they do this from a base called Icarus that they've established, that is basically a base with a Stargate that is small moon of nothing, of solid quadrium. Not solid, but huge deposits of this mineral, so they can use the power from that mineral to power the gate to get them to this location. And when they finally arrive, when they dial the gate, they are attacked by the rogue faction of former Gould operatives trying to, the Aleutian Alliance, trying to stop them and get the Aquadria. And because of this, the base is destroyed, and Earth's only access to Destiny is gone. So once the team arrives on Destiny, they're stranded on the ship. They can't get back to Earth. It's impossible. They don't have the equipment on the ship to get back to Earth, and Earth can't find another moon to build a base to get them back. So that sets up the whole plot for Stargate Universe. And because of this, they did happen to take with them some communication stones that we see in Stargate SG-1, where two people can touch one stone and each, and they switch consciousness. So they can swap bodies, basically, and people from Destiny can go home, be with their friends, their family, and loved ones for a short time, and people from Earth can come to Destiny to be briefed on what's going on and all that. So there is communication between Destiny and Earth. But that's not really a solution to the problem of them being stranded on the edge of the universe. And with the Aleutian Alliance invading the base, some of them ended up on Destiny as well. This is basically where the internal strife on Destiny comes from the Aleutian Alliance members and the Stargate Command members. So season 1 is kind of complicated. They're starting to figure out, okay, this ship is on a mission, and they're trying to figure it out. And right there is where season 1 ends. Now season 2 is where Rush finally decrypts the master code, giving him access to the logs of Destiny. Now, with this, he can figure out what their mission was. And the mission of Destiny was to find the source of a signal that seems to have been produced prior to the Big Bang. Now, this is where everything goes crazy, because the Stargate team and the Aleutian teams want to survive. They want to get back home, but Rush won't have it. He's singularly focused on carrying out Destiny's mission, because solving the answer to what was right before the Big Bang is more important than ever going home. Finding this out is the most important thing in human existence to him. And so he kind of runs his own little mission, his own strategy to keep them going forward. Now, Destiny, I keep on, the Stargate Command team eventually worked things out with the Lucian Alliance team. The very radical members eventually get taken out, and the others that are in favor of working together stick around. And everything starts to be going okay until they arrive at a planet and are attacked by automated drones. These automated drones were created by a race that no longer exists, with its sole programming to destroy any technology that is not their own. And because of this, Destiny, every time they jump from planet to planet, the drones have already calculated where they're going to go based on the pattern from where they've been. So from here to the edge of the galaxy that they're in, the drones have set up ambushes to take out Destiny. And with this, they have to come up with a completely wild and crazy solution to get past this, because they still can't turn it back. Rush is pushing them on, and the only alternative is to put everyone into hibernation. They have the hibernation pods on Destiny, and they got all of them working, save one. The goal of this is to get everyone in there, divert all power to the engines, and shoot them across the divide from the galaxy they are in to the next one, bypassing the drones and continuing on their mission. But the only way to do it is everyone in there will have to be in hibernation, and one person has to stay out. And it ends with Eli volunteering to stay out, with the consensus that he's the smartest person to figure out how to solve the problem with the tube, solve the power problem, and has the compassion to take care of everyone on the ship. So it ends with Eli standing on the observation deck as Destiny is shooting through the universe. And this is where the franchise ends. Now, I do wish we got a conclusion to this, and there's stuff out there, but we won't cover that. But on the side note, there is more to Stargate Universe than just these episodes. You're like, what? Yes. Eventually, during this series, the internet was kind of getting big, so they did mini webisodes that you could view on the Stargate Command website. And they vary from 30 seconds to 3 minutes. And these are just little clips of all the keynote recordings that Eli was doing for his documentary. And this is kind of interesting, but I would say it's worth skipping, but all of them are available on YouTube. And they're kind of cool. They're just kind of, to me, they're like behind the scenes clips, but everyone's still in character. And it gives a little more information about each character, a little bit here and there. Some of them are literally just, hey, get that off me, turn the camera off. And they're interesting, and it's, I forget, it'd take about an hour or so to watch all of them, I believe. There's quite a few of them, but this was back in a time when internet was still kind of spotty in some areas. So, like I said, the longest clip was 3 minutes, and they made quite a few of them. But you can watch them all on YouTube. They're up there for free. And some of them were released on DVDs and Blu-ray sets, but some of them are missing. But all of them are available online. So if you want to go check those out, because you just want to consume everything Stargate, go for it. If you don't, I promise you're not missing much. Now let's talk about the final entry into the Stargate universe, and that is Stargate Origins. And this is how it started. It was mini webisodes that were only available if you subscribe to MGM's Stargate Command subscription service. And eventually, they were all edited together and released as Stargate Origins Catherine. Now, this is just kind of like Continuum, in my opinion. The story ends where it starts, and it does give character development to Catherine, who, if you don't remember, was the original woman who recruited Dr. Daniel Jackson in the movie and in SG-1. And her and her father were the ones who originally found the Stargate. Now, it gives a little bit of character development to Raw, but it mostly focuses on Catherine and kind of a little more explanation in how the Stargate was found and the condition it was found in, and why some of these things are there. Now, the story is a prequel, obviously, and it's about Catherine Langford and her father and several German soldiers. And you're like, what? German soldiers? Yes, German soldiers. What this is Catherine and father are trying to decipher the Stargate, and the Germans have had information on it and have been trying to decipher the dialing device. And so basically what they've done is they've got the address for Abydos, and they are going to dial it. So what the German soldiers come in and take Catherine and her father hostage, power up the Stargate with two or three jeeps to give it power and dial it by hand. And we've seen this several times before, using alternate power and using the dialing device without a dialing device, actually turning the Stargate by hand. Now, when they do, they're transported to Abydos, and they meet the Goa'uld Aset, where Aset is Ra's wife, mistress. I'm not quite sure on the dynamic there, but her and her father, when they're there, they're taken prisoner, and the Germans basically launch a campaign of trying to recruit the Goa'uld to come back to Earth and fight alongside the Germans in World War II. Yeah. Yep. That's exactly what they do. And they're like, if you help us this, you will have our entire army. And it's all propaganda footage that they brought with them. They brought a projector and footage with them to show the might and power of the German army and what they can do and how they can help her, and they can help if they help them. And it's very interesting, and it's worth a watch because you're just the whole time you're kind of like, is this okay? Are we allowed to make this? Because it's something else. It's not bad, but the entire time you're watching it, you're kind of like, should we be investigating this storyline? It just feels weird, from a modern day perspective. Is this something we really want to look into? But they do it anyways. And basically, that's what this is. It's them navigating Abydos there when Ra comes back and realizes that Aset has given birth to a Harcesis, which we've learned about before in SG-1, which is when two Goa'uld have a baby together. That baby has the knowledge of all the Goa'uld with no symbiote, and so he's coming back to kill that baby in Aset. And before that happens, Aset wipes the memories of Catherine and her father, and they jump back through the Stargate. So they literally wake up looking at the Stargate, only remembering that they were looking at it, something happened, but they're not quite sure what that was. So they have no knowledge of the Goa'uld, no knowledge that the Stargate works, that just something weird made them forget, and they're just kind of cloudy. So once again, story starts, continues, ends up right back where it left off, save one person not making it back. Very minor character, and they just kind of like, what happened to him? Oh, he must have run off with some local woman. And that's how they write it off. He died on that planet. Oh, he must have run off with some lady, and that's the end of it. And it's a weird one. I like it, but it's kind of like, did we really need to make this? I don't know. But here we are. And that is Stargate Origins in a nutshell. So I've done major brushstrokes, broad brushstrokes of the entire Stargate universe and franchise in the visual media. So let's break it down and what this looks like. There was a total of 4 movies, 378 episodes, with a total of 277 approximately viewing hours. And this includes 213 episodes from Stargate SG-1, 99 from Atlantis, 40 from Universe plus the 34 webisodes, and 26 episodes from Stargate Infinity. This was about a 7-week endeavor for me, watching at like 40 hours a week or so, a lot on the weekend. And I do suffer from insomnia, so it wasn't too hard of a deal. But I watched the majority of this on Amazon, which meant I saw the same 6 commercials over and over and over again, but I did not include that in this runtime. I kicked myself from ever selling my Stargate seasons back in the day to make ends meet, but here we are, and I have to say it was a daunting task. So if you are looking to consume the entirety of Stargate, this is what you're looking at, 277 hours. Now, I will break down that you do not have to watch all of this to really enjoy this. So let's take a look at how I recommend you consume the entire Stargate franchise. Now that we've talked about it all, what's the best way to do it? Now, this is my opinion of how to best view the timeline of the Stargate franchise in order. First, you want to start out with Stargate Origins, Catherine, and then move on to the original Stargate movie, and then seasons 1 through 7 of Stargate SG-1. Now, season 8, we get the New Order double episode, and Atlantis Rising, the double episode. This is the crossover where it launches the Atlantis storyline. And for the next 3 years until SG-1 ends, it was aired SG-1 followed by Atlantis on Sci-Fi Channel, and there was a little crossover here and there. So it would be like you'd watch episode 803, 103, 804, 104 of the series. But I will tell you this, if that gets really daunting and really annoying to do that for 3 seasons of SG-1 and 3 seasons of Atlantis, you can watch them season by season, and you'll just have to kind of make mental notes, and it's fine. You want to be pure about it, do the episode by episode. After season 3 is where I think Ark of Truth fits best, because it's the end of season 10 of Stargate, and Samantha Carter has not come to Atlantis yet. So to me, it fits best right there. Then we got season 4 of Atlantis, and right after Search and Rescue, the first episode of season 5 of Atlantis, Samantha Carter is recalled back primarily to do the story for Continuum. So that's why I put it right after season 501 of Atlantis, then watch Continuum, because that's the reason Samantha left. So it feels in that natural timeline of the story, and then come back to season 5 of Atlantis, then followed by season 1 of Stargate Universe. And this is where, if you're going to watch the Kino episodes of Stargate Universe, this is where I put them all in, binge them all here, because about 90% of them take place in season 1, and the ones that do take place in season 2, you can't really decipher it unless you know that's when they aired. So I would binge all the Kino episodes in between Stargate Universe season 1 and 2, then do season 2. And if you absolutely are committed, watch Stargate Infinity after that, because it does take place 30 years later after Stargate SG-1, and essentially after all the live action Stargate. But honestly, this is one of those where you can literally just stop at Stargate Universe season 2. Now let's talk books. Like every major sci-fi franchise, there's always a slew of books and an expanded universe in written form, from Star Trek to Battlestar to Babylon 5 to, yes, even Star Wars. It still exists to us. Can't take that away from us, Kathleen Kennedy. And Stargate is no exception. Now I'll break this down in kind of how they're by series. So basically, they did a novelization of the movie and a junior novelization for younger audiences, and they wrote 5 more novels that take place right after the movie, before SG-1 ends. It basically covers Hathor taking over Abydos and them going to free the people of Abydos, which kind of is weird because it doesn't quite fit the timeline. So it technically is part of SG-1, but it's not exactly the SG-1 team. So that's kind of a little murky water there. But it is what it is. And I have not read this, so I can't give anything more than just what I know of the synopsis of each book. And then and then we skip into the SG-1 series. And they did novelization of the first part episode and wrote 35 more books that take place in that universe. Some are episodes within those books, and some are completely divergent from anything related that we saw on screen, which is great. And in Atlantis, they did it again. They made a novelization of the first 2 episodes, and there's about 24. I didn't write down the notes. It features a lot new adventures and more characters, and expounding on a lot of the different peoples and other places that they visited but didn't really take time to explore, which is very cool. And then we get to the what is called the SGX series, and it's a 8-book series of SG-1 and Atlantis team adventures, kind kind of like we get some of those crossover episodes. There's about 8 of these books that focus on both teams working together in the book. Those are cool too. And then we get to Universe. And unfortunately, Universe did not get the same treatment. They made a novelization of the pilot episode like they have before in the other series. And they stopped. Granted, SG was only two seasons, and it was not received well by fans at the time, leading it to not very many works done around the Stargate Universe series. So that's where we left it. This series was kind of doomed in almost every respect. I think just because they changed too much from the formula. But also, there was a lot of comic books, and they cover everything from SG-1, and there's even a couple of Universe ones. And they're all over the place, and I mean, some of them agree with other comics, some of them aren't, and it's just more fanfic than actual studio approved novelizations, and they're kind of cool. I got to see a few of them, but I don't have them. And then the other thing I didn't know existed till I started doing this is they made audio dramas. Stargate for several years released about 24 audio dramas with the cast members of SG-1 and Atlantis actors voicing their parts, which is awesome. Doctor Who did this. Doctor Who still does this with audio dramas, and it's really cool that we get to hear the same voices, while not all of the cast members, those that are there, were several returning from both series to do the audio dramas. So those are something to look into. Now, I haven't read the books or the comics or listened to any of the audio dramas, but after binging 277 hours of content, I do need some time to kind of have my brain relax and go on to something else and then come back, because I think trying to collect all these books, which is in the back part of my OCD brain telling me to do that, is going to take some time and a lot of money, I suspect, because some of these are 30 years old. So it may be hard to find some of these. But if you've got them, these are great to get a hold of, because it's just like any extended universe. I have friends that have read them, and they agree that the novelizations are wonderful. The panels I've read of the comics look cool, and the story seems good. And I do believe a few of the audio dramas are available on Audible. So I'm going to have to check those out as well. Now, what's a good science fiction franchise without a slew of video games to accompany it? And there were probably about half a dozen games that got started that never made it to market. But I'm going to run down a list of Stargate games that I've found that did come out. Some are still available, some are not. And we'll look at what's continuing to happen in the gaming area of Stargate. So back in '94, they released a Tetris-like puzzle game for Game Boy and Game Gear, where you flip the tiles and unlock the chevrons per level. And it looks kind of fun, but honestly, you can tell it was made in 1994. Not great, and the concept was very interesting, but it from the footage I saw, it could give you a migraine playing it. And then in 1995, they made a side-scroller style game on the SNES and Genesis that kind of reminds me of Jurassic Park. For the time, the Jurassic Park game that was released around that time. And then moving on to 2003, they released an SG-1 role-playing game. And it was very similar to most role-playing games, but it's one of those things, they made it, and it was probably well received by fans, but it did not make them much of a profit. role-playing games are kind of hard to launch when it's based on a franchise. It's not completely independent upon itself. So it still exists. You can still buy them on eBay. I looked it up. But they're out there if you want to get your hands on one. Now, in 2004, they made a mobile game, but called SG-1 Mobile, I believe. No, Entropy Syndrome. And that was in 2007. And it was a follow-up mobile game to the 2004 one. I'm sorry, I got confused there. They made one in 04, made one in 07. 04 was kind of just Stargate SG-1, and then they made one SG-1 Entropy Syndrome. Sorry, I got those confused. And both were okay, but both are no longer available. You know, they didn't keep up with the requirements to keep those mobile games active. And then also in 2007, they made a trading card game, and they did a physical trading card game and a virtual one online, and you can still get the cards. You cannot access the online version of it anymore. And in 2010, still going on with more games, they made Stargate Resistance. It was an online first-person shooter similar to games like Fortnite, and I wish I knew it existed back then because I probably would have gotten into it. It has the GoldenEye feel from Nintendo 64, and it was kind of fun. It looks like it'd be really cool, but once again, this game has been taken down forever because it was online only. And then we get Stargate Command. Now, this was a weird one. It was only available through the MGM Stargate Command subscription service, and you had to get it, but you could buy free. You could play the free mini games if you're a subscriber, and you could pay extra for a additional content called Tilt's Revenge. And I thought this would be kind of cool, but the app and site are now defunct, so you can't even play it. I tried to see if anyone made any ROMs for it because I thought it'd be fun to play. I couldn't find any. And now in 2013, we got Stargate SG-1 Unleashed. And it was a venture mobile game with 2 episodes with original voice actors voicing some of the characters, but it was pulled from the app stores after the gaming company went under. So another one that made it to market but didn't last very long. Now, in 2021, can't believe it, 2021, there was a crossover event with a game called Astro Kings that got Stargate characters and items into that game. It was a cool little crossover, but I never played Astro Kings. I've never played it, but it would have been cool to kind of, like, I got into Fortnite for certain skins so I could play with them. I probably would have given it a chance if I could have gotten those, but if you wanted those quests and those items and stuff like that, you can no longer get them. That crossover event has passed. But however, as you can see on the screen, Stargate Timekeepers was released in 2024. That's right. This year, back in January, this was released. It's a story-driven campaign set in the SG-1 universe. It's very, it's a strategy game. It's not a combat game. You're kind of trying to reestablish beachheads and take back areas using strategy, not so much firepower. And it looks really cool, but it has received a lot of mixed reviews. It is on my Steam wish list. As soon as I get finished with a couple more games that I'm playing through right now, I'm going to get on it. But even though Stargate has nothing new in the media, video games are still being produced. The fandom and the desire for more Stargate is there. And this is just fills my heart with love and joy to know that there are so many Stargate fans out there. And I do wish this game, Stargate Timekeepers, receive much better love. Hopefully by the time I get to it, there's an update or two that and make some improvements to make this game awesome. Okay, now we've reached the end of the video. Well, the last part of the video, I should say. This is what I'm calling the Amazon Prospective. And this is some of the things that I've gathered and searched for and continually look for, and I've pieced together what I know, and I'm going to speculate on some of the things that may or may not happen. So I've written a lot of this down and tried to process so much of this because there's so many rumors and it's hard to tell what's true and what's not, and I've done my best to piece together what's happening and what may or may not be happening. So Amazon purchased MGM back in 2022, and later that year, in December 2022, Amazon announced that MGM and Amazon Studios were going to be making a reboot of the Stargate franchise. The creators of The Expanse, Mark Fergus and Hawk Ostby, were on the short list of possible showrunners for the new Stargate. No mention of Stargate on MGM's programming slate this year when they made their announcement back in January or February of 2024. And that's a bummer because we want more information. We haven't heard anything for 2 years. But, we had a writer's strike, and we've had a couple of things that put a lot of Amazon stuff in production on hold that they did not see as immediately profitable. Somehow they keep making Rings of Power, but hey, more power to them. To me, this series is an absolute moneymaker if you do it right. So there's a lot of things that could contribute to why they've delayed this, haven't really pushed it, because they did lose a lot of money with Wheel of Time, but they've done well with Reacher, and depending on how you look at it, The Boys. And so the realm of possibility that this is going to happen is still on the table, because a lot of that stuff is coming to an end. The Boys is coming to an end. Rings of Power has wrapped production and most likely will not have a third season, so this is freeing up a lot of time and resources for them to revisit Stargate. The original plan, from my understanding, was they were going to make a movie and a series that would be a complete reboot. But I think this is a mistake. Now, you'll lose a lot of the fan base that's already there that will come running to see any new Stargate material if you do a full and complete reboot. Now, I think you can do it with a new Stargate series and not a reboot. And I have 3 ideas for series. And these, I thought about these a lot, and I think these can fit into canon and not step on too many toes, but do well. The first would be a time jump from the finale of Atlantis. And let's call it Stargate Epoch. I don't know, I just came up with a name. This makes it easy to recast new actors, has the built-in realistic side of worlds coming to terms with the world coming to terms with aliens and explaining what happened when the Atlantis base landed, even though it was not quite seen, but yet kind of seen. This opens up exploring more of the real world impact that they did in Stargate SG-1. And I think this would be brilliant. But it also means that they could, from this point, after navigating this, send the Atlantis base back out somewhere and continue the series and maybe another possible spin-off series from that storyline. So that's my first idea. Second would be a new off-world base that the series takes part from. There are many alpha sites over the series, but never really fully explored. But let's call this one Stargate Hyperion, after the Greek Titan of Light. And here we can have an off-world base with the Quadria core like they did for Icarus base that launched the team to Stargate Universe, allowing them to not just explore further than before, but create new technology based on ancient technology and the off of the ancient technology of the Quadria and so many other alien technologies combined in to explore whole new realms of untapped potential. And this would leave a lot to explore because, as you remember, the Asgard gave them all their technology and knowledge before they disappeared and just passed on. So we have a limited amount of resources, knowledge to create and build something that is not just Stargate, but an explosion of Stargate and technology into the future. And I think this would be a base somewhere, probably like in the middle of the former Gould territory, that would help squash out the rest of the Gould minor system lords and things like that, so we could still have the Gould in the storyline. So we got some more. It's not completely new. We get a little bit here and there of what's familiar. And I like that idea. But I do have a third one. And this one isn't really obvious, but it is my favorite because it's weird. And not a lot of Stargate fans will like it, but I do like it. And this goes back to Season 2 of SG-1. When SG-1 was doing their time travel episode, where they traveled back to 1969, and on return, trying to get back home, were catapulted into the future, where they walk into Stargate Command, and it's shut down. But Cassandra's there. Now, Cassandra, remember, was the daughter of the young girl they found on that planet who was later adopted, and Samantha helped take care of her. And we'd have to say this was probably about 60 to 80 years in the future from the end of Stargate, SG-1. And covering what happened during that time, the shutdown of SG-1, and possibly the reopening of it again 80 years in the future. This can create a whole new series, and a whole new era, I should say, of Stargate. And let's call it Stargate Eos, for the Greek goddess of dawn, in a sense of the new dawn of Stargate, because it's completely far removed from what we have, but still stays true to the Stargate series as a whole, the franchise as a whole. Now, here the storylines are completely endless. You can do whatever you want. New threats, new people pulling up, new Gould system lords that have come back, new system lords that have grown in power. We've got possibly even Wraith have made it to the Milky Way, some surviving Wraiths, some replicators. I mean, it's endless. This is a weird one, but it is my favorite, and I like to see that. But I do want to take one last moment to thank you all for watching this video. This was a much larger production than I planned on doing. I planned on trying a few new things, and it would, much bigger than my Babylon 5 retrospective. And each season was what I was going to do. Each series was what I was going to do a breakdown, but I thought, oh my gosh, there's going to be so much time and so much consuming, so I'm going to pack it all into one. And I know I did such huge broad strokes, but I just want this to be a revitalization into your mind to go back and visit this beloved science fiction franchise. Now, all I can say is I absolutely loved enjoying watching all this, diving deep into a lot of what's out there, a lot of what I didn't know. Hopefully, you've learned some things, and we can discuss what you think should happen with Stargate in the comments below. I would absolutely love to hear from you all. And thank you for sitting through such a long video. And as always, my friends, and to all that have come here for the first time, I love you all, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Indeed. 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 Indeed.